It was 3:01 by AM, again, and I was, of course, awake. My eyes were glued to the digital clock display next to my bed. I'd switched off the alarm function ages ago, trying to avoid any extra pressure to fall asleep. But the numbers blinked anyway, 0317, and beneath them a faint blue line of text I didn't remember setting. Sleep is calling. I ran a hand over my stubbled chin. A malfunction, probably. The old apartment and its ancient wiring system had always been a little quirky. I laughed, a dry, weary sound that felt wrong in the quiet room. Just a glitch. Yeah, that had to be it. I sighed, dragging myself out of bed. Another night that stretched on and on. My head throbbed, a dull ache that had become as constant as my own shadow. My body felt heavy, like it was pulling itself through treacle with every movement. I shuffled to the small bookshelf beside my bed, picked up the dog-eared detective novel I'd been trying to finish for weeks. Maybe some murder mystery would distract me from the gnawing awareness of my wide-open eyes. The soft yellow glow of my reading lamp tried its best to push back the persistent darkness that clung to the corners of the room. I started to read, forcing my tired eyes to follow the lines about a missing person, a cold case that gripped the protagonist. But then, as I reread the third line, I could have sworn it changed. The words, they shimmered, twisted, forming something else. Instead of a description of the detective's grim determination, it read, "Death isn't the end, Alex. It's the start of a deep sleep. Don't you want to close your eyes too?" I blinked hard. The text was back to normal, a perfectly innocuous sentence about police procedure. My breath caught in my throat for a second, a small, startled gasp. My heart gave a little skip. But no, I told myself. It was just the fatigue, the lack of actual rest playing tricks on me. My eyes were probably blurring. Just lack of sleep. That was all. I tossed the book aside, the soft thud echoing too loudly in the apartment. I needed coffee, strong, black, anything to kickstart my brain, make it focus on something real, something solid. I walked into the kitchen, the cool tiles under my bare feet a welcome shock. I opened the faucet, letting the water run, trying to create order in this endless night. My hand reached for the electric kettle. As I filled it, I heard a sound. A wet, rhythmic sound. The water sloshing inside the kettle, it sounded like heavy breathing. Each breath a soft metallic thrum against the metal under my fingertips. I gripped the kettle tighter, my fingers feeling the faint vibration. I placed the kettle on the stove, my movements careful, deliberate. The sound stopped. I exhaled, a long, slow breath. I looked out the window. Beyond the glass, the city was still wrapped in darkness, a few streetlights casting long, distorted shadows. But when I turned back, my gaze landing on the kettle, a thin stream of something dark, almost black, was trickling down its side, spreading onto the countertop. At the same time, the breathing from the kettle intensified, growing louder, deeper, filling the empty kitchen, as if the room itself was gasping for air. It was a cold sound, a sound of something trying to draw breath, but struggling, rasping. I stared at the dark liquid, then at the kettle, then back at the liquid that seemed to be spreading, oozing. My body tensed, every muscle suddenly rigid. I dropped the kettle. It clattered on the stove with a clang that made me jump. I stumbled back, shaking my head. No, no way. This couldn't be happening. I needed to see something normal, something outside. My hands were shaking as I picked up the binoculars from the living room table. I pressed them against my eyes, focusing on the windows of the apartment buildings across the street. I scanned each rectangle of light, my breath held tight in my chest. And then I saw her. A woman, sleeping on her sofa, her mouth slightly open. A strand of her hair fell across her face. And right there, next to that strand of hair, something thin, like a wisp of dark smoke, was coiling. It wasn't a fuzzy shape or a trick of the light. It had eyes, two burning amber points that glowed in the dim room, staring intently at the sleeping woman. It slowly extended a long, bony finger towards her temple. My stomach dropped. I realized with a sickening jolt that what I was seeing wasn't an illusion. It was real, a tangible thing. It was mimicking her most deep, terrifying fear, and it was slowly, deliberately, pulling itself completely out of the darkness. I swallowed, my throat dry, gritty. It didn't vanish when I stared. It stayed there, a natural yet horrifying part of that room. It was like it belonged. And me, Alex, the insomniac, was the only one wide awake, the only witness. I rushed to the television, fumbling for the remote. I clicked it on, flipping to the local news channel. A man with a too-wide smile was talking about a collective insomnia phenomenon spreading through the city. His voice was overly cheerful, almost sickeningly so. Suddenly, his smiling face vanished. The screen went black for a split second, then a screeching voice, not his, blasted from the speakers. It wasn't human. It was dry, rattling, like leaves being scraped across cold concrete. You don't need to look, Alex. You already know. Save them, or join us. Then, just as quickly, the screen came back to life. The newscaster smiling again, continuing his talk about sunny weather and traffic. The whole world outside my eyes, seemed corrupted. And I, the only one truly awake, found myself caught in some hellish play. My hands were sweating. This wasn't just happening to me, was it? I tried to keep a semblance of order in my life. I always did. Despite the relentless ache in my head, the grinding weariness that pulled at my bones, I still dedicated hours to my research. My work, an odd mix of dream science and obscure folklore, felt like the only anchor I had left. I sat at my desk, surrounded by stacks of books and papers, sipping my endless black coffee. I'd type out notes, cross-reference data, searching for a rational explanation for the insomnia, for these things I was seeing. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I was drafting an email to a colleague, a long-winded explanation that sounded too scientific, too detached, even to my own ears. That's when it started. My computer screen flickered, not like a bad connection, but a kind of internal tremor. The letters on the document began to drift, separating from their words, then reforming themselves into new, random sequences. And then a single line appeared, repeating itself, glowing in an eerie green. Wake up, don't sleep. Wake up, don't sleep. It wasn't fading, it was etched there, solid. And at the exact same moment, I felt it. A light breath, barely there, just behind my neck. A cold, damp warmth that made the hairs on my arms stand straight up. I whirled around, heart hammering against my ribs, but there was nothing. Dust motes danced in the sliver of light from the window, but that was all. I slammed my palm against the keyboard, trying to delete the words, to make them disappear. They didn't. They just stayed there, pulsing. Only when I reached down and physically switched off the monitor, plunging my desk into sudden darkness, did the words finally vanish. I pushed back from my desk, the scraping chair protesting sharply. God, I needed a break. This was all just stress, lack of sleep, pushing my mind to the edge. Yeah, that had to be it. I went to the kitchen again, poured myself another cup of the now lukewarm coffee, trying to steady the frantic drumbeat in my chest. I opened my browser, searching for anything. News about mass hysteria, some weird new virus causing collective hallucinations, anything that would give me a normal explanation. But every headline was mundane. Politics, the economy, local sports. Nothing. Absolutely nothing about flickering computer screens or breathing kettles or glowing eyes in a neighbor's window. I shook my head, my lips forming silent words. Just illusions. It's just illusions. But the conviction was already cracking. I walked to the living room window, pulling back the heavy curtain a fraction, peering out. The apartment building opposite usually has its curtains drawn tight across most windows, but there was a small gap in one, a dark slit in a beige wall. I brought my eye close to the glass, looking. And then I saw it. A face. It wasn't human, not really. It was distorted, stretched, as if molded from shattered glass and raw fear. A chaotic patchwork of expressions that shifted and rippled even as I watched. It was looking back at me, directly through that narrow crack. It slowly, terribly, pulled its lips back, revealing thin, needle-sharp teeth that seemed to gleam in the faint, reflected city light. I froze, my eyes wide, glued to that thing. A wave of icy coldness washed over me, not just on my skin, but directly into my mind, as if it was reading every thought, every frantic denial buzzing in my brain. There was no hiding this. It saw me. I ripped the curtain shut, plunging my side of the room into artificial shadow. I stumbled back, bumping hard into my desk, sending a stack of books crashing to the floor. My breath came in ragged gasps. My chest burned. I pushed myself away from the desk, my hands clammy, trembling. I knew. I knew then that what I was seeing wasn't just fatigue. It wasn't a malfunction. This was real. I sank into my chair, my shaking hands clenched so tightly my knuckles turned white. My laptop felt cold beneath my fingers. I opened it, navigated to the obscure, encrypted database where I kept all my research on dreams, on ancient folklore, on anything that hinted at the edges of what we considered reality. I had to understand. I need to know what it is, I whispered, my voice rough, barely audible even to myself. The first rays of dawn were trying to pierce through the gap in my heavy curtains, casting a sickly greenish-blue light across the room. My eyes were still glued to the laptop screen. My fingers, numb from endless typing, scrolled through countless old papers. An article from some forgotten scientific journal, tucked away in an archive, spoke of collective neural resonance within the dream state. A crazy, discarded theory. Just a footnote in the history of science. Now, it echoed in my head like a warning. Then, I opened a less reputable page, one marked as urban legend fodder in my notes. It reported on a small town called Oakhaven, which had been under a strange, creeping curfew. No one was allowed out after 10 p.m. The report spoke of peculiar disappearances, all of them involving people suffering from chronic insomnia. Police was downplaying everything, of course, calling it mass delusion or mental health crisis. But a shaky, grainy video, leaked obviously, showed soldiers in full hazmat suits in Oak Haven's town square. They were burning something massive, its shape warped and indistinct in the flickering flames. The video was blurry, distorted by static, but I could swear I saw sinuous lines, like tentacles, trying to writhe free from the fire. I remembered the TV news from earlier, the screen going black, that voice, all of it. It wasn't just me losing my mind. The very bedrock of reality was crumbling, cracking under a pressure I couldn't comprehend. And I, the one who couldn't sleep, was the cursed witness to its first fissures. My inability to close my eyes had saved me so far, yes, but it had also thrown me headfirst into a different kind of hell, where I was forced to watch everything fall apart. My gaze drifted back to the screen. The flickering light illuminated an illustration from one of the incredibly rare, ancient texts I'd scanned and digitized years ago. A book with cryptic symbols and unsettling drawings, something I'd found buried in an abandoned library. I'd never fully deciphered it, not really. Now, a single term floated to the surface of my consciousness, echoing in the quiet chamber of my mind. Ancient Dream. My eyes darted to one of the book's illustrations, a drawing that now seemed painfully clear. It was an eye, not quite human, with tiny, needle-like fangs growing around its pupil. I looked out the window again, the city still mostly dark, dotted with distant, weak lights. Were their eyes, the eyes of those sleeping beneath those distant lights, slowly changing color too? The last line I recalled from that strange book, a fragment I'd dismissed as poetic nonsense, now felt like a prophecy, a chill working its way into my very bones. I glanced down at my wristwatch, 03:17 a.m. Again. It displayed the exact same time, a relentless, chilling reminder. The weary sigh of the city settled over the encroaching dawn. Or maybe it was my own sigh, a sigh of resignation, as reality itself slowly, deliberately, began to close its eyes. The city was a tomb. That's what it felt like anyway. A big, concrete and steel tomb, where the silence wasn't empty, but thick, like something heavy settling in the air. I had slipped out of the apartment hours ago, just before the pale, sickly light of morning began to creep over the rooftops. Needed supplies, you know. Water, canned food, things that wouldn't spoil. The streets were mostly empty, littered with overturned trash cans and abandoned cars. It wasn't like the movies, no real riots or anything, just people leaving, or maybe just stopping. I was making my way down what used to be Elm Street, past the old bakery with its shattered window. The smell of stale bread still clung to the air, oddly comforting and unsettling at the same time. Then I saw it, just sitting there, a rusted blue sedan. And the windshield, it was smashed, yeah, but not just broken glass. The cracks spider-webbed out, forming something specific. I mean, it looked like a face, a wide open mouth, eyes stretched wide like they were trying to scream. A jagged line where the nose should be. I stopped. My breath hitched, just for a second. I told myself it was just the way the light hit it, the reflection of the boarded-up buildings opposite. My eyes were probably blurring. Too many nights with no sleep will do that to you. I leaned closer, squinting, trying to make the image go away, trying to find the trick. But it held there, frozen, ghastly, a scream that echoed in glass and metal. I shook my head,
tried to shrug it off. Just a glitch in my vision. Had to be. The grocery store was further down, a small mom-and-pop shop that used to have the best coffee beans. Now the main door was gone, probably ripped off its hinges. Inside, it was a mess. Shelves mostly bare, merchandise strewn across the aisles. But then I looked down the canned goods aisle and, no, it wasn't empty. It was full. Not of food, though. A line of dolls. Old porcelain things, some with faded dresses, some missing an eye. They were all sitting there, perfectly upright, lined up on the dusty shelves. Every single one of them, facing me. Their glass eyes, dull and chipped, seemed to catch the weak light, reflecting it back in a way that made my skin crawl. Like they were waiting. For me. I felt the hair on my arms stand straight up, a cold shiver running right down my back. This wasn't right. I tried to walk faster, to get through the store, to not look at them, just keep moving. My head throbbed. I found a couple of cans of beans, dented but sealed, and a bottle of water. I stuffed them into my backpack, my hands moving quickly, too quickly. Just get out, get out. As I was leaving, stepping over a broken jar of pickles near the doorway, I heard it. A child's laugh. Clear, bell-like, from inside the store. My blood ran cold. There was no child. No one else was here. I froze, my body rigid, listening. The laugh faded, then started again, a little bit closer. No, not a laugh anymore. It changed. A soft, gurgling sound, like someone trying to cry but couldn't. Then a dry, rasping gasp, like something with no throat trying to make noise. I turned around, slowly, my heart thumping against my ribs. The line of dolls was gone. All of them, except for one. An old porcelain doll sitting right where the aisle opened up into the main store. Its mouth was open, stretched into a fixed, chipped smile. And from inside that tiny porcelain mouth, I heard it again. A faint, wet sound. A struggle for breath. A low, soft groan. I scrambled backward, stumbling over my own feet, my hands gripping my backpack straps so hard my knuckles hurt. No, this wasn't real. I was just really, really tired. I had to be. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Away from the doll, away from the store, away from the screaming windshield. I wasn't running from monsters, not the kind you could see. I was running from the things in my head, the thoughts, the fears that were suddenly out there, taking shape. It made my stomach churn. I plunged into a narrow alley, hoping to cut through to another street. It was dark, smelled of old garbage and something else, something sweet and sickly, like rotten flowers. And there, slumped against a grimy wall, was a girl. Young, maybe 20. Her eyes were wide, staring up at nothing. Her breathing was shallow. In her trembling hand, she held an old phone. Its screen cracked, broadcasting a faint, tinny sound. A woman's voice, desperate, pleading. "Help me, please, anyone, wake up." My mind raced. "Alex, you idiot, what are you doing? This is a trap." I knew it. But I couldn't just leave her. She was suffering. She was real. I pushed the thought down, the warning. I had to help. I reached out, my hand trembling as I tried to gently lift her arm.
And then, just as my fingers brushed her skin, she dissolved, like smoke,
like old ash blowing away in a sudden gust of wind. Her clothes, her hair, even the phone, they all just faded, leaving behind only the sickly sweet smell and the lingering echo of the pleading voice. I stumbled back against the wall, my legs suddenly weak. My breath came in ragged, desperate gasps. My mouth tasted like rust. It had been a lure, a pure, crafted illusion. This was a trap, all right, and I had walked right into it. I knew then. I couldn't just keep running, not from this. It was inside, out there, everywhere. It was watching, waiting. If I didn't face it, really face it, then what was left? Nothing. I pushed myself away from the wall, my mind a painful mess of questions and raw, terrifying realizations. I had seen the blurred video from Oakhaven, remembered the strange message on my TV. It wasn't just me, it really wasn't. And it was getting worse, much, much worse. I came to an old park, the one near the river where I used to bring my wife for picnics. Now, the trees, they weren't just dead, they were wrong. Their branches, once thick and leafy, were twisted, gnarled now, like skeletal singers clawing at the gray sky. Not bone white, but a sickly gray-green color, like moss on stagnant water. The leaves, where they existed, were brittle and black. I heard the birds, or what I thought were birds, a dry, rasping sound, like a wheezing cough, over and over, and under it a faint whisper, too low to make out any words. It seemed to come from everywhere, from the very air itself. The pressure in my ears built, like climbing a mountain too fast. My eardrums ached. I tried to tell myself it was just the wind, whistling through the dead branches, but there wasn't any wind, not a breath. The ground beneath my feet felt soft, not like earth, but like something was compressing and expanding, a slow, heavy pulse. I just kept walking, one foot after the other, just something a little strange, nothing too special. That's what I tried to tell myself, anyway. Then I saw the old church, St. Jude's. Its stained glass windows were mostly intact, but they refracted the dim light into grotesque, fractured images on the grimy floor. The doors were wide open, a gaping maw. I could hear sounds from inside, low moans, weak shouts, desperate sounds. A cold dread seeped into my bones. People were there, and they were suffering. I couldn't just walk past. I crept in, staying close to the shadows cast by the crumbling pews. The air was thick with the metallic tang of fear, and something else, something cloying, sweet, like burnt sugar, and sweat, so much sweat. There were people, maybe a dozen, slumped over the pews, on the floor, in various states of sleep. Most looked like corpses, their faces ashen, mouths ajar, but they were breathing, barely. My eyes fell on 3 men, side by side on a wooden bench at the front, near the desecrated altar. They looked like they had just collapsed there, mid-sentence. And from each of them, a thin stream of black smoke, not quite solid, not quite gas, began to curl upwards. Like tendrils, they snaked through the air, slow and deliberate. Then they met. Above the sleeping men, the smokes merged, swirling into a tighter spiral. It began to swell, to blacken, to take on a shape. It grew taller, bigger, a formless shadow at first, then I could make out limbs, long, spindly extensions that moved like blades, razor-sharp, glinting in the faint, distorted light from the windows. It was huge, towering over them, over me. A thing of pure black fear, forged from their shared slumber. It had no face, just a vast, gaping maw that seemed to absorb all the light. I heard my own choked gasp, a small, wet sound caught in my throat. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against my bones. The shadow, this thing, slowly, so slowly, extended one of its blade-like arms towards the head of the man nearest to it. I wanted to run, wanted to scream, but my feet felt glued to the floor, and my throat was too tight. This was their nightmare. I recognized it now. It was coming alive, right in front of me. No way, no damn way. The blade arm swept down. I flinched, closing my eyes, bracing for impact, for the sound of something wet. But it never came. Instead, a pale greenish light flashed. A high-pitched, vibrating hum filled the air, cutting through the silence like a knife.
The shadow thing recoiled, a soundless scream seeming to ripple through its form. It shriveled, parts of it seeming to dissolve, retract. "You don't sleep either, do you?" A voice, hoarse but steady, cut through the buzzing in my ears. I opened my eyes. A woman stood there, stepping out from behind a pillar where she'd been hiding. She had deep, bruised circles under her eyes, like she hadn't slept in years. Her hair was a wild, tangled mess. In her hand, she held a small cylindrical device, glowing with that same eerie, greenish light. She looked at me, her gaze piercing. "Come on," she said, her voice a low rasp. "Unless you want to be food for your own fear, or theirs, for that matter." She was Sarah. She explained things as we ran, not in a panicked way, but with a weary, knowing resolve that chilled me more than any monster. She talked about the refugee camps for people like us, the insomniacs. How it had started small, then exploded. How the things we saw, the monsters, they weren't just random. "It's the fear, Alex," she whispered, her voice barely audible above our pounding footsteps as we dodged through a collapsed section of street. "Every whisper of doubt, every tightening in the chest, every time you jump at a shadow, that's fuel. Not just for your own nightmares, for everyone's. When enough people fear the same thing, or just fear, generally, it merges, becomes something else, something bigger, something you can't fight with a gun." She spoke about the erosion of reality, how it wasn't just physical deformities, but the very fabric of existence rotting from the inside out. "Our fear doesn't disappear," she said, her eyes fixed somewhere far ahead. "It just feeds them. It eats away at everything, every worry, every stress, every bit of pressure. It's what makes them stronger. It's why this world is gone." A cold, horrifying understanding began to seep into my bones. This wasn't just a plague of monsters. This was humanity's own psyche devouring itself, self-destructing. My muscles tensed, a new terrible truth settling over me, heavy and suffocating. My helplessness was a palpable thing. We ran through a narrow alley, then burst out onto what used to be a bustling main thoroughfare. I looked up instinctively. The towering skyscraper where my wife used to work, the one with gleaming glass panels that reflected the morning sky. It was still there, sort of, but the glass wasn't glass anymore. It oozed, like thick black tears streaming down its sides, forming new, impossible curves. The concrete had a fleshy look to it, expanding, contracting, like a massive rib cage breathing. Slowly. Inhale, exhale. A derelict bus lay on its side in the middle of the road, its windows shattered. On its cracked windshield, written in something dark and crusty,
like dried blood, were 3 words: "Welcome to the Dream Mausoleum." My gaze drifted from the horrific message to Sarah's face. Her eyes were dull, almost vacant. This wasn't my city anymore. It was a gaping wound. We were standing right inside its mouth. We found a place, a Ministry of Defense research lab, abandoned, of course. Alex, Sarah, and a few others we'd picked up along the way, other insomniacs. Just a small, desperate group. The machines were dead, but some screens flickered faintly green, like dying fireflies. I found a stack of encrypted hard drives buried under dust and debris. Sarah, she had a knack for these things. A quiet, focused intensity that made me trust her instantly. She went to work on them. Suddenly, the screen in front of her exploded with data. Ancient characters, twisting mathematical formulas that looked like madness, and audio logs. So many audio logs. We listened, huddled together in the gloom. One voice, a man's, strained and cracking with desperation, echoed through the abandoned lab. "The boundary wasn't broken," he whispered, his voice catching. "It was eroded from within, by us. Our fear isn't just a catalyst, it's a language. It's being used to rewrite this world. Every nightmare is a brushstroke. Every collective fear, a line of code." The log cut abruptly. Then a security camera feed from deeper inside the lab flashed onto another screen. It was dark, blurry, but we saw it. A vast, amorphous shadow, its form indistinct, coalescing from a corner of the room. It just looked right into the camera. Then it extended a long, skeletal finger, touching the screen, leaving a faint, smeary trace.
Then it vanished. At that exact moment, the lights in our room began to flicker wildly, sputtering, almost dying. Our own screens went haywire, displaying streams of meaningless symbols. I felt it then, a crushing pressure. Not just on my body, but here, right here, in my mind. Like an ancient, twisted consciousness was sifting through our thoughts, reading every fear, every desperate hope. This wasn't just about fighting monsters. It was about fighting a thing that bent reality, using our own terror as its weapon. It was everywhere, inside and out. Sarah laid out an old, tattered map of New York City on a dusty table. We'd found it in a locked drawer. The original map was faded, with familiar roads and buildings. But on its surface, faint green lines were slowly spreading, almost alive. They formed deep, impossible valleys, jagged, bony mountains, lakes of something black and still. They were redrawing the entire map, neighborhood by neighborhood. I found the small red dot Sarah had marked, our current location. Even it was being engulfed by a patch of that sickly green, spreading like a disease. Sarah looked at me, her eyes somehow lifeless, tired beyond words. "What we see, what we fear, it's being recorded," she said, her voice a hollow rasp. "And it's being used to change the world. It's coming here, right here, and soon no one will sleep anymore." A coldness seeped from the map, up my fingers. The soft creak of the paper as Sarah smoothed it out sounded like a whimper, like a dying thing. The outskirts of the city, where I had grown up, where my memories lived, were just a green, shapeless blotch now, a mausoleum. And we were standing in the borderland, waiting for it to reach us. I looked at the map.
then at Sarah, and then at the dead screens of the forgotten lab. Maybe sleep really was calling, not for me, but for reality itself. And it was closing its eyes, or whatever passed for eyes in this new, awful world.